I was completely wrong about Dark Sun. For years, I was convinced they'd really have to nerf it if they ever had any hope of publishing it ever again. They got fans all excited with the apocalyptic subclasses and the Scion class in the 2025 Unearthed Arcana releases, and it looked like Dark Sun was maybe finally coming back. Then they dropped an absolute nuke during the 2026 Gen Con D&D keynote. D&D's first official mature rated setting, a hard R, 18 plus, shrink wrapped, warning labels, lawyers involved, the whole thing. From everything that they've shown so far, this does look like the real thing. Unsanitized, real old school D&D with all the stuff that made the Satanic Panic headlines back in the day when D&D was metal, very metal, and nobody saw this coming. I'm Chris. This is The Art of Character, a Dungeons & Dragons podcast where we explore all things D&D. Let's roll. All right. Welcome back to the channel. I'm really glad that you're here. So, here we are, Dark Sun. It is one of the most beloved settings in all of D&D's history, and it's also one of the most brutal and controversial. I mean, really controversial. For years, fans have wondered whether Wizards could really ever truly bring it back without fundamentally changing what made Dark Sun, I mean, let's face it, Dark Sun. They tried in 4th edition, but it was nerfed and toned down a little bit. The 2nd edition one, kind of the real Dark Sun, that's kind of really where it all took off. And so it begins again. It returns in early 2027 as the season of survival, embracing all the environmental devastation, defiling magic, psionics, tyrannical sorcerer kings, and a relentless struggle for survival in an absolute obliterated hellscape. Shrink wrap books to protect, oh no, the children. Mature ratings, age verification, it's already on the website, warning labels. The reveal trailer even teases nudity, graphic violence, apocalyptic horror, and decapitation. I've heard there are apparently even going to be these real decapitation rules. We'll see what happens. So then there's this next part, and I'll try to say this without earning a YouTube strike. The original Dark Sun also included persons eating or snacking on other persons. Cannibalism. And then, let's say, persons being kept in forced labor conditions against their will, as a significant part of the economy being bought and sold. I don't know. Slavery. And then, species cleansing wars. I don't know. How would you say that? Something along those lines. Anyway, the themes, and these themes are so brutal and so dark, and they were a big reason many people believed we could never really return to Dark Sun in its original form. However, all of those things really are parts of a lot of different fantasy settings. You can even see them in Faerun and the Forgotten Realms. So why was it so taboo for Dark Sun? Well, it was very in your face. It pulled no punches, and it was very integral to the world of Dark Sun. And then there was the art. So the Dark Sun art by this guy Brahm left absolutely no doubt what this was going to be and how truly dark it was. And I believe it was kind of this combination of everything being so overtly in your face and the art just kind of put it over the top, and why a lot of people felt there would be outrage if it was introduced today. Also today, we have this whole internet, social media, and outrage culture, and everybody felt this whole thing would kind of just blow up in WotC's face. And we can't be entirely sure exactly the way all of this will be included in this new release, but we can break down and show you what we think is coming. Will this be the boldest D&D release in decades? Stay tuned. All right, so here's what we know so far. It's coming in early 2027, and this will be the first Dark Sun release since the 4th edition releases, and really the main kind of real Dark Sun releases were back in the 90s. The 4th edition ones were really kind of tame in comparison to the 90s kind of 2nd edition versions of Dark Sun. So we know there will be 3 main books, and here are 2 of them right here. So we've got Blood and Power. Those will be kind of the gameplay or the player expansions. Then we've got the Edge of Oblivion. This is kind of the campaign book and tells all about the Dark Sun setting. They say there will also be a Dark Sun player's handbook with alternate art. We're thinking maybe just a cover, but I don't know. Maybe there'll be some additional content and additional art throughout that book. Also, a DM screen. So those are the main parts of the content. And we do know in the player options, the gameplay expansion, that there will be some new classes and subclasses, and they talked about a lot of those in Unearthed Arcana, but we'll see what else comes with that. We're not quite sure, but I can show you some of the things we think will be in there. And then for Edge of Oblivion, in the release, they went over a bunch of the city-states and kind of these Sorcerer Kings, these kind of evil Sorcerer Kings, and some of those that will be included. We'll go over all of that and give you a little bit of a flavor for what will be coming in this release of Dark Sun. And then what about the world? So it is an environmental hellscape, as we mentioned, but there's also kind of this environmental destruction that comes from this defiling sorcery. So a certain kind of magic that they do in this world basically draws from and destroys parts of the land. So that's a little bit about what's happened. Then they've also treated the areas pretty poorly. There's been a lot of war and just basically wholesale, widespread destruction. And civilization barely hangs on. And then so what kind of holds this thing together? There are these city-states who are ruled by kind of these mad, evil Sorcerer Kings. It's a little bit like the Dark Lords in Ravenloft, but a different bit of a concept right here. So Psionics are widespread. If you don't know what those are, it's basically using the power of your mind to attack and do things that are kind of like magic, but a little bit different from magic. And then also there are these psionic monsters that kind of stalk these wastelands all around and kind of stalk the good guys or the players. Gods have more or less abandoned the land. And magic doesn't really work the same in Athas, so it's entirely different. It's a little bit like a fantasy setting meets something like Mad Max and just kind of takes that whole thing, puts it together. You just get that brutal, absolute survival. Most things are completely and totally destroyed, and they're just these wicked, evil, monstrous Sorcerer Kings ruling over all of it. I mean, what could possibly go wrong, right? So what about the apocalyptic subclasses? There will be these and maybe some more, and these are directly from Unearthed Arcana. So then we have the Circle of Preservation Druid. The purpose of this subclass is to restore nature. It's directly opposed to the defiling magic of the defiling sorcerer. We're not going to go into all the details. There is the gladiator fighter. So they are an arena champion. They are a martial survivor and just an integral part of this world because they do have these gladiator fights and kind of this blood sport that's already a part of Athas. And then defiled sorcery, we talked about that. This is one of the things that causes destruction to the environment, to the land. This is a type of sorcerer, and they drain life and they corrupt the land as they engage in their magic. Then their patron is a Sorcerer King, and that could be really interesting here in Athas. And then we have the Scion class, and this is the first completely and totally new class since the Artificer, and this was also introduced Unearthed Arcana in 2025. So we have, here are the subclasses right here, 3 subclasses. We've got the Metamorph, the Psychonetic, and the Telepath. So the Telepath, they focus on mind control and psychic communication. The Psychonetic, this is really telekinesis and force manipulation. And then the Metamorph, this is about body transformation. They essentially make themselves into a living weapon. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the world. And when we talk about the world, one of the things I want to talk about is some of this absolutely insane art. And this thing right here, so let's take a look. This is a screenshot from the video, or I guess the whole scene from the video. And one of the opening scenes, this person right here, I guess this woman here, reaches into this guy's head, basically into his eyeball, rips his head off, I guess part of these decapitation rules, and there's kind of his whole spinal column over here. I mean, just absolutely brutal. There's also some psionic warrior there that kind of explodes the head of these 2 female creatures that look topless. It is just absolutely blood-soaked and brutal. I love it. I love all of this crazy kind of apocalyptic, horrific whole setting. It is just fantastic, and I'm loving the art so far. So what we're going to do real quick is go over a bit of the art and talk about some of the city-states we believe that are coming, or at least the ones that have been announced so far. So then there is Tyr, and Tyr is the closest thing to a free city in Athas. There was a revolution, and then in this city-state, they assassinated the Sorcerer King. This is kind of fragile hope in this whole dying world, the closest thing to a normal environment in all of Dark Sun, or in all of Athas. And then we've got Draj. So the Sorcerer King here, Lifebringer, essentially considers himself a living god. So there's this reality and gravity bending in the environment, and Lifebringer demands blood sacrifices to fuel his power. So again, one of those kind of hard R elements of Dark Sun, living sacrifices, blood sacrifices to kind of keep his power going. Ah! Then we've got Gulg, and the Sorcerer Queen here is Lalapui. I think I said that right. She is this forest goddess, and there are massive tree towers and corpse plant guardians, and the forest feeds on the spirits of of the dead in this kind of horrific realm, this horrific city-state part of Dark Sun. Then we've got Uruk. The Sorcerer King is Hamanu, and this is a military superpower. The society is totally and completely built for conquest, perpetual conquest, and perpetual war. And their whole purpose here is military domination of all the other city-states to take as much land and power as they can by absolute military force. And then we've got Rom. It's a little bit like late-stage Rome to me. It is collapsing. Civilization itself is collapsing, and every day could be your last. Consequence, taboo, and debauchery, and it can all be bought by coin or for flesh. And then there's Nibene, the Sorcerer King they call the Shadow King. And they're these scientists that are part of this realm, and they want to do this kind of psychic communion with the Shadow King. They want to find ancient knowledge, forgotten science. They really are pursuing immortality and want to commune with aliens. I mean, we've got forgotten science and aliens and D&D in a fantasy setting, and they're pursuing immortality. I love it. And what could possibly go wrong? And then we've got Balak, and this is about the reckless pursuit of power, mad ambition, and environmental destruction. There are these deadly magical remnants, and this is what happens when you let that defiling magic run completely and totally rampant, and it basically destroys nearly everything. Look, Dark Sun has always been different. It's both brutal and decadent at the same time. And I really don't know another way to say this, but this is very mature fantasy, and not for the faint of heart. You've got to deliberately want to step into this kind of environment to play in Dark Sun. In this type of fantasy, you aren't heroes out here saving the world. I've already said that. This is far from Tolkien type of fantasy. It's far darker. It's much more about surviving the worst that we as people in this modern world could dream up in a fantasy hellscape type of environment. So if Wizards really delivers on what they've announced, this may be the coup they've needed to bring back some of the old grognards who have left the game over the direction of D&D. So is WotC showing that D&D still has room for darker, more mature stories alongside everything else the game has to offer? That's what they've said in the press releases. This is their intent. They want to do this and more of this. Now we wait and see if the books actually deliver. I'm looking forward to finding out. I'm really excited about Dark Sun. I have high hopes. So I've been disappointed before, but I will wait and see. So what stood out most to you from this recent press release? Let me know down in the comments. I really want to know what you think. Are you excited about Dark Sun? All right. Whatever you choose to do in Dark Sun in the future, I hope it will be, I don't know, very, very, very dark. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Art of Character. If you've made it this far, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing, or click below and join our Patreon or our Discord. You can also click below and get something from our merch store. Until next time.